welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, founder and director of Intuitive Interim and Executive Search. Throughout this series, I will be sharing engaging conversations with talented leaders from across the UK transport sector. Today, I am delighted to welcome Zak Shayler, Senior Project Manager at Turner Townsend. I've known Zak for a few years now and have always been completely inspired by his energy. I'm confident that our Intuitive Insights audience will really enjoy hearing his career story and his take on his 3 wishes for the future of the UK transport industry. I hope you enjoy. Zak Shayler, Senior Project Manager for Turner Townsend, a very, very warm welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you for having me, Nina. Great to see you as well.
You're very welcome. And as we've already said in our little chat pre-recording, I'm going to acknowledge that you are taking part in Movember. So for forevermore, that will be kind of held on our podcast as a witness to the amazing amount of money that's being raised at Turner Townsend. So well done to you. And I'm sure it's worth every penny to have an itchy face for 30 days. So well done. In terms of the traditional format for Intuitive Insights, we are going to head straight towards your career story, please. I'd like to go right back to the beginning. I'd like to know, in terms of kind of higher education, coming into your career, what were the decisions you made early doors that have kind of set you on this path? Talk us through it. Tell us your story right up until the role that you're doing currently for Turner Townsend.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd also like to say, in real life, the moustache is definitely better than it appears on camera. So it's nothing to do with my ability to grow facial hair. I promise you, it looks better to me in the mirror. So
I will believe you. I'm sure it looks very dashing.
Thank you. So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And you often hear a lot about talks about people's careers and how they got into transport and rail in particular. And I don't think mine is unusual in the sense that so I studied politics at university, went to university in Swansea, which is in Wales, which is very wet, but a lovely part of the world. And I left there in 2013, did a couple of jobs in between, the classic sort of saving up, going traveling, and I sort of put that bit of part of my life to bed, saw some great things from around the world. And I came back and I sort of thought, right, I need to get a career here. I need to find some stability in my life, and how am I going to achieve that? And it was my girlfriend at the time, her dad said to me, I think you'd just be good at project management. You're quite organized. You're a little bit sort of, you're the one in your friendship group who organizes things, whether that's going to events or going on holiday, whatever that might be. You're that kind of person. So I lived in London and I knew about Transport for London. And they were a brand that I recognized, and they were, an organization that I could align with. And I applied for their graduate program on a whim. I was on holiday skiing in Austria, went online, applied on the portal, and that was it. Didn't think anything more of it. And he was in that stage of the application process where you just think, right, that's another one done, on to the next one. Positive feedback, got invited to an interview, went through sort of the assessment process, and I got accepted, and it was great. I joined an organization that had real sort of values and purpose.
Right.
About making the lives of Londoners better every day, and you could see that in the work that you delivered. And it was a 2-year graduate program as a project manager, and I worked on a variety of projects. It was 4 6-month rotations over 2 years, across all different modes, so buses, roads, rail, and it really allowed me to get a flavour of what I liked within the transport sector, and if indeed I liked it at all.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting, and it was a bit of it was up to you as to how you sort of spread yourself over that 2 years, the projects that you worked on, and where you ended up. And it was great, and I really enjoyed working in rail and the underground. I suddenly had this sort of real fascination for London Underground and how it operated, and I couldn't believe that this is the way things run, and these are the processes, and this is how projects are delivered. And so, yeah, after the 2-year graduate scheme, I ended up in a permanent job working on the step-free access program, so making the tube network more accessible.
Yeah.
And it was a mayoral priority, so it had funding, which, as we know in the current day and age, is critical to anything. Funding's really important. It had protected funding as well, which is even more important. And that project was fantastic. And that's where I first learned that the project's the project, but the people are the people. And the people make the job exactly what it is. And so a great team ethos. It was long hours, it was hard work, it was tight deadlines, but the people you worked with made that possible. And that was what was really exciting about that project. And it sort of gave me my grounding in project management for delivery. And seeing people use those stations that we made step free was great, and that's what it was all about. And from there, moved on in my career, went to work on the Four Lines modernisation programme, so the upgrade to the signalling systems on the subsurface railway, so the District, the Hammersmith and City, the Circle and the Met Line, um, new infrastructure, new signalling, new trains, and I'd never worked on railway signalling before, so having sort of gone through the process of understanding civils and infrastructure and concrete and things that you could see and you could build from the ground up, I was now working with communication based train control that I had no idea about what I
Right.
was doing.
Wow.
And that was really interesting, and I really enjoy that challenge of knowing that I have transferable skills and I can utilize them, but also being the person in the room who knows the least about the technical product, because
Mm.
that challenge and that pressure is really interesting. Um, and as part of that work, I got to move to Toronto, to Canada for 6 months,
Yeah.
which was really unusual. And when I tell people that I worked for Transport for London, but I was based in Toronto, they can't quite compute how that
Yeah,
works.
which line's that on then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you explain that actually the supplier is based out there, and that's where the software is developed for the train signaling system. And again, that people part was really important because that was really difficult. You're sort of uprooting yourself and your life to go somewhere else. And I think you all know as well, and anyone who works in rail, if you travel a lot, people have this glamorous idea of travel and being amazing, away on a train or away on a plane, when actually you're a little bit transient for most of it, aren't you? You never really feel
Yeah.
settled. Um, and that was great. Went there in June 2019 on an initial 6 month program and placement. And I think towards the end of that, I had a conversation with my girlfriend, and we were talking about, I've been asked to stay out there. What's best? And relationships about compromise. So I returned home to the UK, and that's how
Right.
that went. But I had a great time. And actually, as it happened, the pandemic started in the beginning of 2020, so it wouldn't have lasted too much longer than that anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and TfL was a great place to be. They recognised my development, and they put that at the front of it. Wasn't just you are a person in a company. Here's what you need to do. It's we care about your development journey, and they recognised that of the capability that I'd built up over the last sort of 4 and a bit years, 5 years, I hadn't got any rolling stock experience. So the Docklands Light Railway was rolling out a program of new rolling stock and upgrades to the depot and some modifications to assets. So I went to work on the rolling stock program,
Right.
which was really interesting. I'd never worked with trains before physically, designing new trains and light rail. And I'm so gutted because they're manufactured by CAF in northern Spain. So if the pandemic hadn't have been going on, I would have gone from Toronto, Canada, to a few trips to San Sebastian, which
Oh,
there's
nice.
worse places
Yeah,
to be.
absolutely.
Um, and that rounded off my journey at TfL. I think for me, I got to a point where delivering my day job wasn't extremely challenging, and I wasn't comfortable with that. I always wanted to feel like I was on the back foot slightly. Having to draw on a lot of experiences, and not that work was so tough that it sort of sent you over the edge, but it was tough in a way that made
Yeah.
you think about it in detail. And I decided to move to the civil service to work on High Speed 2.
Mm.
Um, and I worked on High Speed 2 Phase 1, so procurement mainly. And the civil service was a really interesting place. I'd never really dealt with central government before. Um, and it was a great experience to understand how the strategy that set out at that sort of much earlier stage in the project life cycle, as it were, and being one step removed from the arm's length body and the contractors delivering the work, was really interesting. Understanding the nuances between um, civil servants in the Department for Transport, the approvals and authority you had to get from the Treasury, how that worked
Mm.
with Cabinet Office and their involvement, and all of these moving parts together. Red tape and bureaucracy is probably a bit of a lazy sort of acknowledgement to what it is, because they all play a vital role in delivering, mega projects. Um, but that was really interesting because I went into an environment where civil servants who don't have tons of delivery experience, and I could bring all of that experience with me and become sort of a little bit of a delivery specialist in that sense.
Yeah.
Um, and providing that expertise and that knowledge to parts of the route that we're going on, and also procurement of the 2 stations in the Midlands, which was really interesting. And then from there, I'm where I am now. So I think for me, I only spent 14 months in the civil service, but an opportunity came up to join Turner and Townsend, and I felt like I'd spent 6.5 years in the public sector. Um, and I wanted something else. I wanted to go and sit on the other side of the table and have the opportunity to move around to different places, possibly go and work in different sectors and have a new challenge. And I think it came at the right time. And yeah, so in March of this year, I joined Turner and Townsend, which is where I am now. I spent a little bit of time working in aviation.
Yeah.
Over
Really
at Heathrow.
interesting project at Heathrow. Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. I'd never worked in aviation before. We were tasked with reopening Terminal 4, which had been
Mm.
closed since the start of the pandemic. And it was essentially just a recommissioning of this huge terminal that you walked around. It was a bit like a ghost town, bringing together all those different components from all of those different areas of the organization, from baggage to security to airside ops to bringing all the airlines back in. You were sort of overseeing this huge operation coming together. And it was just great to see. And the people, again, the people that I work with, they were excellent. I went out with them last night actually for some food, and I said to them, it's one of the best projects I've ever worked on. It wasn't particularly long, and
Yeah.
it wasn't high value, but it was very complex, and that was about bringing things together to get something done in a very challenging timescale. So yeah, that was great, and that ended. And I guess to round off the career to date and the project I'm on now, I'm working on the Elizabeth line or Crossrail, which is something I'm delighted about because I never had the chance to do it. And I
Yeah.
and I always think there's that time that you'll come and look back and you will say, "Gosh, I wish I did that." And I'm not building the stations and I'm not putting in the escalators and delivering the trains, but I'm working on the reliability of it in operation, which is just as important because it's all about the user experience and what the customer sees at that
Yeah.
station and how that works. So yeah, it's really interesting, and it's sort of drawing on experiences I have from my four lines modernisation days about signalling and systems and passenger interfaces, and it's a little bit of what I know, but I'm very glad to be back in rail.
Yeah. You can hear that in your voice. You kind of that, and I'm in a really privileged position because I speak to so many people who have this shared passion that you have for the railway and how it works and the purpose of it. And it's I love it. I absolutely love it. I can hear the passion in your voice and also the pride in terms of what you've been involved with before.
Hmm.
I'm going to take you back a little bit into back into TfL days when you were presented with this opportunity to go to Toronto. And I know you and I spoke about it at the time whilst
Yep.
you were going through that decision-making process. For anyone who has that opportunity, just talk us through, Zak, how you actually made the decision that yes, that was the right thing to do, to go kind of, a long way away for 6 months of the year, to go and work in a different environment.
I think it's a great question. I think for me personally, it was you weigh things up, and we had a couple of conversations about this, and the advice you gave was great on it. But I also think I was told very early on in my career, just say yes to things.
Yeah.
The worst that can happen is you don't like it, and if you don't like it, for a reason why you don't like it, and you can take yourself out of that environment or that situation. But if you say no, there's always that possible chance of regret, of thinking, "Gosh, I wish I'd done that." Um, but I weighed it up. There was a big draw. My life is in London. I still have a girlfriend and now a fiance in
Yeah.
London.
Yeah.
And my family are here, my friends are here. I'm an extrovert, but you're putting yourself into a complete sort of series of isolation around not having any friends, not having any work colleagues, in that environment. It was very difficult. But I think on the balance of things, looking at it as sort of a long-term picture, the benefits to me overall in terms of a learning experience, in terms of my career and the opportunities that hopefully would come out of that, and just exploring different places, far outweighed the disbenefits. But yeah, I think the support of friends and family and my girlfriend made that possible. I think without
Yeah.
that wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're glad you did it.
100%. Yeah, I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
delighted.
and the other kind of the other big move, I guess, and the fact you've recognised you'd had, a big chunk of your career in the public sector. So now time to step out of that into the exciting and dynamic world of the private sector. Has that been a big culture shock, Zak, or as it kind of just does it feel pretty much the same?
It was quite difficult actually at the start. And it wasn't in terms of the culture, it was more in terms of being you're in two places. So you're trying to build up a network of friends and colleagues and a reputation at the company you work for, so for Turner and Townsend, whilst
Yeah,
also trying to build up a network of colleagues and people you need to buy into your project goals at Heathrow, and you have to build up that network. And so doing them both in parallel was very difficult.
yeah,
And it was difficult because you can only be in so many places at once, and you're trying to, I guess your project comes first because that is what you're being paid to do, and that is your task. That's what you're there to deliver. But it sort of took about 2 or 3 months to settle into it, and after that you find that the rhythm, it goes as you would expect it to do.
mm,
But I'd never worked in a place before where my network of colleagues was different to the ones that I was working with on a project, if that makes sense. And that was difficult. I think as I said earlier, I think I enjoy that challenge of having to always be on top of your game, and you have to do that
yeah,
in the private sector, I think more so than in the public sector. Um, but certainly experiences in terms of people's ability and their willingness to succeed, there is minimal, if any, difference between the public and private sector in that sense. And that's
yeah.
certainly what I experienced as I worked through into the civil service and then into where I am now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You've used the word networking there, which is a subject very close to my heart. It's one of the areas, do you know, when people say to me, what do you wish you'd known earlier on in your career, or what advice would you give to your younger self kind of question? Mine is always to understand the value of networking, of building relationships. I wish I'd known that earlier on. I'm very, very happy with where I am now. But I kind of
Hmm.
think, gosh, right, what would I have done if I'd kind of cottoned onto this sooner? Where would I be? But the networking, I mean, we first met through the National Rail Awards because you were on the judging committee, and I'm delighted to hear that you're coming back for the 2023 season. So that is brilliant news. But you came into that as part of the Young Rail Professionals, didn't you? As a YRP candidate. So was that important to you early doors, Zak, in terms of building a network?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you start out new in an industry, I think you need to have people around you who are like-minded, and whether that's like-minded in terms of technical ability or like-minded in terms of, ambition or drive to succeed. I think that being in that sort of group mentality of people with, who are like-minded can help you succeed as well, and that's important.
Mm,
Um, and it's been drummed into me from very early on in my career. And I started out quite late, I guess, when you speak to other people who started graduate schemes. I was 25 at the time. Um, and I think that little bit of maturity helped. Oh,
yeah.
I'll have to turn the
Do
lights on.
you need 50p?
Yeah, let me turn the lights on. Typical. Um, I think so. Networking, I think, is really important. I think, yeah, I had it drilled into me from very early on how important that was, and meeting people and just going out. Because again, it's that thing. What's the worst that can happen if you have a conversation with someone and you don't get along? Then that's fine. You don't have to speak to them, ever again. But if you do get
Exactly. Yeah.
along, it's great, and you've made another colleague, a friend in the industry. And I'm sure you'll agree that rail is full of people who enjoy talking about rail
Oh,
and who are just
absolutely.
good people.
Yeah.
They're good people who want to help you. It's
Yeah.
not about what's in it for me, what am I going to get out of it. There's a real desire and passion to sort of share how great the industry is and bring people along with them on that journey. It's not about keeping all the secrets locked away in the
Yeah.
cupboard.
You're so right with that. You're so right. It was one of the things, and continues to be actually, kind of 10 years on. When I first came into the industry, I was absolutely blown away by the number of people who were prepared to sit down with me and explain how this industry works. who does what to whom, and where does the fares money go? You know, where when you buy a ticket, who gets the money for it? How does it all work? How does it all fit together? The number of people who were prepared to do that, and the passion that's there as well in terms of wanting to share that knowledge and information, I think is incredible. It's one of the many things that I love about the industry. And one of the other things, I guess, which fits really well with what you've just said, is that I have it on good authority that you're doing some mentoring these days as well. So that's kind of that, you know, kind of paying it forward stuff in relation to sharing some of your knowledge and supporting people as they're kind of coming up and making decisions in their own careers.
Yeah, and it's really important. I think paying it forward is really important because I know just how important that was for me. And I know we talk about sort of passions and what's a passion in the industry. You know, what do you really like and what do you enjoy? And I make no apologies for mentioning people again because they are so important. And as you know, we've just talked about, the people are great. And having that structure and that support of people who actually wanted to help when I started out in the industry, I think was sort of the difference between falling in love with it or just thinking of it as a job.
Yeah.
And I'm so keen to help now. And at TNT, with you know, it's the typical sort of graduate cycles, you know, September time, bringing people onto programs, and I look after two graduates who've joined recently. And you know, I've not been at the company long myself, but I think you don't need to know everything there is to know about the company. I think the purpose about, you know, life skills and maturing and growing in the discipline is important. And I've got a real passion for helping people succeed in those early stages if they want to, because I know how critical it is to your development. And yeah, I think, you know, you make friends as you go through. It's not just people you work with. You spend so much of your life at work. You might
Yeah.
as well get along with the people that you work with, and you don't have to directly work with them, but yeah, have interactions with them. And mentoring is a great one. I think there's lots of different ways of mentoring, and I think people can have preconceptions about mentoring and about how structured it has to be, but actually, you know, you could give someone one piece of advice that helps them out, and that could only be once every 2 months or 3 months, but that's still helping someone. And I think that's, you know, that's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And one more question before we move on to kind of the next stage of the podcast. Was that the right decision then? That advice that you got from your girlfriend's father back in the day, project management, are you glad that's what you chose to do? Does it fit nicely?
It does fit nicely, and it's weird how things work out. It really is strange how things work out. You know, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I didn't even know much about project management as a discipline. And you know, yeah, it's great the way things turn out. I feel like it's a great fit for me. I think as you evolve through your career, you sort of move slowly with your head above the parapet and you work out projects and programs and industries, and that's great. And that's a natural flow that I'm looking forward to. But yeah, I guess in a direct answer to your question is yes.
Brilliant, fantastic. So let's move on to the state of play in the UK transport industry, and specifically rail, bearing in mind that's where your experience is sitting. I'm going to give you the time-honoured three wishes, Zak, in relation to what you would like. If you ruled the world, if you were sat at the top in the position of power and you could make any changes to what's going on in the industry at the moment in relation to making us fit for the future, what would those three changes be?
I thought long and hard about these because there's you know, I think I could have filled 333
Yeah.
wishes. um, but and I've been a bit cheeky, sort of, you know, combined a couple, so you have to forgive me.
I will forgive you.
But I think top of the shop is, and this is a real a topical issue at the minute, is a simple user experience, and that's from ticketing to trains to infrastructure. You know, what does the railway look like to you know, Mary next door? How does that feel to her, and how does she get on a train? And I was listening to a webinar last week that Rail were hosting,
Oh yeah.
and they were talking about, and I didn't know this, there's over 2,000 types of tickets available to purchase in the UK, and it's impossible for someone to walk up to a station and tap a card, or, you know, use contactless or a Go Smart card or whatever it might be, and get on a train. And I think as soon as you have barriers to entry, it just puts people off because it's easier to walk outside their front door and get in the car. are, and that is a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So I think a simpler, joined up, better user experience would be my first wish.
Yeah. Perfect.
My second wish is quite timely, given the autumn statement, but it's a commitment of investment to projects that are long talked about
Yeah.
to make the industry fit for the future. Um, Northern Powerhouse Rail was recommitted again today, but only in
Right.
its core form. So
Right.
that doesn't give certainty over the station in between Leeds and Manchester, which is supposedly Bradford.
Yeah.
So there's that. That is a key project to levelling up and delivering a railway that's fit for the future. You've got Crossrail 2, which would run north to south from London or Surrey, London,
Mm.
Hertfordshire. The Bakerloo Line extension, the eastern leg of HS2. All of these projects I wish were made with an eye on the future, not on the budget of today.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we probably all share that wish.
Yeah. And the last one is it's easier said than done, and I apologize to any architects who ever listen to this call, but just good design to cost would be amazing on any project. So I was in Bristol the other week I'd never been to Bristol before. The station in Bristol is incredible, beautiful piece of architecture. And now you look at some stations that are built, they look like IKEA warehouses, and it makes me really sad.
Oh, it makes me sad too. I share that. I absolutely do. My home station, if you like, is Preston. So if I'm coming down to London, I'll go from Preston down to Euston. And Preston Station could be amazing. It needs a lot of investment. So in kind of the main station area, you can see that there's so much potential for it to be developed into something using the old infrastructure that's there and making it into something far more attractive and far more welcoming. But then a few years ago, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe, they've stuck this thing on the front of the station. Well, it's kind of on the side of the station, but it's like you've got two entrances, and the one that you come into from the car park, it's awful. The local papers referred to it as a carbuncle. It was like, what is that? Who's done that? Who signed it off? It's awful. So you've got this really old building that could do with a bit of TLC, but then you've got this horrible thing stuck on the side, like you say, a bit like an IKEA esque building, which I definitely share your pain
It's
on that
such a
one.
shame, such a shame.
Yeah.
You look at there's some great stations, and even at Bristol station, it was incredible sort of stonework to denote the station name, and then GWR had come along and stuck their big signs over it, and I was like, I understand you have to know where you're alighting or boarding, it makes it difficult, but
Yeah.
it's just some consideration for
Yeah.
the history
Yeah.
and where
Yeah.
you are. But
And
yeah,
the history of the railways is so important, and it's it's kind of a big part of it for people as well, I think, and that sense of experience when you're at a station. And you can get that. I mean, I've made no secret of the fact that St Pancras is my favourite station, but that kind of those cathedral type stations, I think, are just amazing.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. But then again, I like Grange over Sands as well, but that's kind of more of a romantic notion, I think, than
I've not been there.
It's beautiful. It's up in the Lake District. It's gorgeous.
Nice.
And I believe that's where Brief Encounter was filmed, but I'm sure
Okay.
somebody will put me right on that, because there'll be loads of people who know. Thank you for those 3 wishes. I think they're great, and I think that there's a couple of them there that we haven't heard before. So well done for bringing something new into the wish list.
Nice.
Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you again in time-honoured fashion for the podcast to share some of your some wisdom with us, some words of wisdom, whether you've got a quote or it's a book you've read or a particular podcast you've listened to. Share some words of wisdom with us, Zak.
Delighted to, and I think books, recent years, probably the last 5 or 6 years, books are great. I don't really read fiction books. Non-fiction books are amazing. Really enjoy them.
Yeah.
There's a couple of books that have shaped sort of the way I think at the minute. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is
Oh
a
my
classic.
goodness, it is a classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that when I was younger than you are now. So that's a long time ago.
It's great. It's about, the shift in mindset, about understanding motivations for other people. How can you sort of achieve what you want to achieve, by sort of influencing others, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
More recently, though, and I think this is really pertinent at the minute, Black Box Thinking by Matthew Said
Right.
is about attitudes to failure and tolerance to failure. And the quote from that book that says failure and our attitude to failure is critical to learning and improvement, I think is so important. I
Yeah.
think so many projects and so many programs and people just in general in life have a predetermined attitude to failure that's, that is you failing, that's bad, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But actually you learn through failing. James Dyson made hundreds or thousands of prototypes of the Hoover before he invented the bagless cylinder.
Yeah.
And projects, Crossrail, the attitude to failure in Crossrail, that sort of fear of culture environment. You have to learn through doing, and you learn through doing and failing, and I think that's really important. And there shouldn't be scared of failing. I think it shows maturity to want to grow, and by trying different things.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And it's really interesting because this is a theme that I'm becoming more and more aware
Oh,
of.
wow.
And kind of going back into my early career when I was kind of soaking up everything I could get hold of in terms of self-development. And my big thing was around the power of your mind and positive thinking. And I remember reading about Edison and how many thousands of attempts he'd made to develop the light bulb. But each time it was kind of, well, yeah, that's not worked. So what do I need to tweak? What do I need to do differently? We'll move on. The same with Colonel Sanders, apparently, and his KFC recipe. It wasn't quite right, so we'll just tweak it a bit here, tweak it a bit there. And there are so many examples of these things. And I doubt very much whether the Wright brothers got it right first time with the plane. So it's very easy, isn't it, to kind of see things as an overnight sensation. And oh, look, they've done that, and how lucky they are because they've got this successful business or this successful invention or whatever it is. But actually, the number of times that you fall over and you have to get back up again on the way to that I think is quite significant. So thank you for bringing that to the attention of the audience. I think there's more. There's a brilliant podcast actually by a lady called Elizabeth Day called How to Fail.
Okay.
And she talks, that is her literally the genre of the podcast is let's talk to people about failures, and there's some amazing conversations on there. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know that other people will as well in terms of listening to your career to date. I am sure we will see you continue to be successful and make some failures along the way so that you're learning, but they help you grow quicker and learn quicker. So Zak Shayler, Senior Project Manager at Turner Townsend, it's been an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Intuitive Insights podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. It's been great.
My pleasure. My huge thanks to Zak. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. I hope you did too. Please tune in for the next episode of Intuitive Insights podcast, which will be with you in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for listening.